Hello and welcome to How to Win the Lottery Season 3 Internet Module. We are here with the author of The Shore, Katie Runde. Hello, Katie.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. This is very exciting because this is a very New Jersey podcast, and weirdly or coincidentally or something, a lot of the books that we've read have been based in New Jersey. This is no exception. So thank you for helping keep this New Jersey tradition alive here.
I found myself a lot of Jersey books. I just wrote this listicle as like a pre-pub thing. And Jersey books are not particularly hard to find. Jersey Shore books are a little trickier.
Oh yeah, what do you got?
Well, a couple Jersey Shore books on the list. There's a really good one called Please See Us by Caitlin Mullen that came out in 2020, and it's a murder book, which is not normally my thing, but set in Atlantic City. It's like a girl comes home / murder book. And then another one called Rock the Boat by Beck Dory Stein that I also wasn't on my radar before I was looking for them. And that's also that's not a murder book, but it is a girl comes home to a Jersey Shore town. And then, of course, you have, those are my Jersey Shore, two of my Jersey Shore favorites. But yeah, you guys have had a lot of Jersey folks on the show.
Yeah. So where are you from originally? Are you from Seaside?
Seaside Park. And my family had boardwalk businesses in Seaside Heights. So just the town right next door.
Okay. So I grew up in Manasquan. You know, I spent 15 years of my life working at the beach in the parking lots, selling spaces for $12 a person and getting abused by the quote-unquote bennies.
Yeah, everyone's so happy to pay that.
Which is so weird. Like my thing is always like, you're from New York. Parking costs like $40 an hour there. Why are you complaining to me about $12 for 24 hours?
Oh, yeah. We had a couple parking lots, too. And I had a friend who worked in one of them, and she got so frustrated with the people coming in. She walked off the job one day. She could not take the abuse.
Yeah, it's the place that, you know, I've worked mostly. I worked at Rite Aid for a while. I've worked as a teacher for a while, but like definitely the place that I've taken the most abuse in my life job-wise is the Jersey Shore. So, yeah, that's that.
So was this book traumatic for you?
This book?
Yeah.
Was this book traumatic for me? In a separate way entirely
yes.
that we can talk about, which we can really get into.
I meant that as a joke, but then I realized what we actually, the behind the scenes. Yeah.
We can get into the nitty gritty of the ways in which I relate to this book.
You know, I was thinking about the working part. Like, I worked in my family's businesses from the time I was pretty young. And so I've been thinking about that a lot because my own kids have a really different kind of upbringing. They go to camp, you know, they live in the Midwest. And it sort of occurred to me, I was like, yeah, it was character building to have people yelling at you about their fries when you were 8. But I was like, maybe you would learn that another way. I'm kind of on the fence about how I feel about that, you know, my kids not having that, you know.
I'm sure. Where are you now?
I live in Iowa City now.
So I'm sure that you can find different ways for your 8-year-old children to get abused by strangers in Iowa City. There's always people out there willing to yell at kids.
Go down to the Dairy Queen.
Mm-hmm.
Probably go anywhere. There's people are angry all over the place.
Yeah. Is Iowa City, is that where the University of Iowa is?
We have the famous writers workshop in town, which it makes for a really interesting literary ecosystem. But there's a big community of writers here who are not Writers Workshop affiliated too.
What college is in Ames?
That's Iowa State. The Cyclones.
Okay, because Ames is a very common New York Times crossword clue, and I know that there's a college. It's like Iowa town with a college. And I'm just like, I know it's Ames, but I don't know what college it is and whatever.
Yes.
So okay,
thank you.
Yes, okay.
That's the other big state university.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. In our we have a Patreon behind the scenes where we have the bonus episodes where we like rank characters, and I think what's interesting about this is that there's a sense of like 4 main characters, but like we really only, I mean, we know 4, but I think there's an interesting thing where there's 4 characters, but we really only know 3, and then for the final little section to be from Brian's perspective, I think is a very emotional sort of payoff. But like, what is it like, I guess, writing a story where there's 4 main characters, but you really only hear from Brian, we don't really hear from Brian. So like, is that an interesting way to like define a character through other characters' memories and thoughts and actions?
Always the question when you have a character who's not themselves for any reason, right? Like, how do you present who they were? So you can only get it through memory and flashback. And from other mediums that we might get to talking about, you know, later. But you also get him for he starts the book too. So I'm sort of hoping in this very little snippet, you know, so I'm sort of hoping that it's in the back of your mind. throughout the book that you might eventually, through the magic of fiction, get to see this part of him that you're missing, right? And isn't that great? I love a book where you sort of forget, right? Like, you forget this thing that the writer sows earlier, and then it just comes right in and hits you later. I love that feeling. I think that's the reason to read rather than watch a movie, right? For those like magical narrative things that you can do only in fiction.
Well, there was a thing when we talked about A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving in the first season. There's a moment I don't know if you've read that, but there's a moment at the end where Bob said he had to lay down, and I said out loud in my car, holy shit, where it's just like, it's a thing that's been like sprinkled throughout, and it's like, you kind of forget about it. And then like it happens, like it pays off like hundreds of pages later, just like, oh my God.
Man, the magic of prose.
That's amazing. And I will say that the payoff with Brian, like the notes that he's writing and the ease, like that was the thing that got me the most, or just like, oh, I see what you're doing, and that's devastating. So it works. It definitely works. So that's the one compliment you get. So I hope.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I got it out of the way.
Oh, but by the way, there's going to be, because our assumption is that people that are listening to this will have read the book, so there are going to be spoilers all throughout.
Yeah.
I assume that. That's what I love to do, a little deep dive podcast book club when I'm really obsessed with a book. I just search for the author's name or the title of the book in my search, whatever my search function in my podcast, and I just binge. I love it.
Oh,
but
cool,
I always
cool.
wait till I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, why would you listen to before you're done? You
Right.
want to be able to have opinions about these things that people are saying.
Right.
Yeah, I have a question. Whenever I have questions, I feel like they're not questions, but really observations by me that I'm looking for other people to confirm. But so I think of this as a novel that like kind of is without antagonists, or at least the antagonists are not human beings, right? I guess in some sense, cancer is an antagonist or grief is an antagonist. But how do you structure something where there are essentially no bad guys? There are only people that we're looking to empathize with.
I have never thought of it that way, unless you go back to your 7th grade, like man versus nature, and like antagonist. So I think for these characters, you have them under this more constant pressure and this more like constant looming specter of first like this not himself person, and then the reverberations of finding a life and finding your footing once he's gone, right? So I think it's more of a constant pressure from which they're just trying to negotiate and escape and find any sort of temporary way to get through to the next moment. Does that make sense? So it's like if that's the constant pressure that's on them, then there's these like little waves of trying to survive to the next moment, right? But also like and finding humor in those moments too, right? Like that's one of the ways they escape.
Yeah, I mean that's the only. I mean, if there weren't humor in this book, if you didn't have characters leaning on things like that, it would be maybe too heavy. Sometimes you get movies and books that are like this that are like devoid of humor.
Bleak. Yeah,
and they just feel like it's very hard to push your way through that sort of thing. So, which is true of life too, right?
Oh yeah, somebody at one of the events I was at in the last couple of days. I was at my little table with my little stack of books, and they were like, okay, tell me about this. I don't want a Manchester by the Sea type of book. And I don't know if you guys have seen that. I would characterize that.
Sure, yes.
I would characterize that as there's not a lot of moments of relief in that one. Oh, boy. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, in retrospect, like the moments of relief are the things that are like only like mildly depressing instead of incredibly depressing.
See, I'll never look at a fireplace again without thinking of that movie. Dear God.
Yeah.
I do think what's nice about this, I think what like gets you through, like I have been lucky, I've been blessed that I have not had to deal with like the kind of trauma and the kind of loss that these characters go through in this book. But I think what worked for me, and I feel like how I would have to get through it, is like the relationship between the sisters, or like with Evie and Olivia, like all like the different, like there's not a ton of characters, but I feel like other than, with some exceptions, I feel like all the main relationships that we follow, well, that's not as true, because like the relationship with the mom, let me rephrase this question. I think that the bond between the sisters is like what kept me going through this, because I feel like it felt so authentic and earned, and they just have such a shared experience that like they figured out a way to get through this thing together with the help of each other. And I think that really worked for me in terms of like how to process this immeasurable loss that they're going through.
At that time in their lives, you can't look outward, right? Like the only person who knows what exactly they're going through, it's in this very specific kind of loss, yeah, is your sister, right? Though they have that same, there's a little bit of antagonism too. Like that doesn't go away. There's still just like the misunderstandings and the like always thinking that the other sister has it easier, right? Or like, so it's hard to be the older sister, it's hard to be the younger sister. So that doesn't go away, right? But they put it aside in a way, I think that because they can't afford not to.
Right, and I think there's a nice, like, you do a nice job of comparing, like, how Liz keeps it a secret from Gabe all summer, and Evie's, like, upfront with it about Olivia, because of the way that, like, those characters exist in the greater Seaside world. Like, one is just sort of a tourist, and one is there more permanently. I think that that draws some, or adds some conflict there as well.
Yeah, I agree. And they kind of are giving each other advice, right? And even though they're both new at love, and yet they're both, like, using what they think they know to get the other one to level up in their love story.
Yeah, and they also bond together in their. I know that I said that it was a novel without antagonists, but there is a sense in which Margot is an antagonist, and Liz and Evie sort of bond together over that kind of antagonism, that they have to like find solidarity so that they can solve this very specific problem of Margot wanting to move them after Brian passes away.
I've talked to a lot of people who have experienced some type of loss of one parent, right, over the years, and who are older now, right, who might be closer to my age. I'm going to be 40 next week. And a lot of them
Happy birthday.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. A lot of them talk about how, in a way, because the second parent is so focused on getting through things and is having such a hard time that you kind of, quote unquote, lose them both for a little while. So for the girls and the relationship with Margot, I think that kind of happens, right? And you sort of take your best guess at like what the parent like would tell you to do. And then you do it or you don't because you're a teenager and you might just do what you want anyway. But in the back of your mind, you're still guessing what they would have wanted you to do. But for both parents, right? It's almost like there's a line in the book about how like in Disney movies, you have to kill off both the parents, right? Like from the beginning. In a way, I guess that sort of happens here, or in any situation where something so intense is happening with one parent.
Sure, yeah.
Because I think you do, like, there's like the parallel sort of like the way that they're both, like, I think the daughters are kind of handling it in a similar way, even though they have different relationships with the dad. But like what Margot's going through is so, I think, alien to them that you get two different distinct stories. And I think that's for sure, like, they do lose the mom because Margot's so in her own head and trying to figure out like what next and what to do next, and so focused on the business, and just they're kind of on their own. So you did Disneyfy it kind of.
Yeah, but it's interesting. They're also, the one thing that teenagers have in common through any era is they will just like not let you get away with, can you cuss or not on the show? I don't know.
Yeah, cuss away.
Like, oh yeah, like they will not let you get away with bullshit, right? Like they will call you out on it. So they just like, when they go and find her in this like Reddit style forum, they're just like, no, we're not having this. We're not letting you just ghost on us, right? Like we are going to come and find you because we need you. Like we're going to find you any way we can.
Yeah, let's actually talk about that for a second, just in the sense of that there's different generations of internet here in this book, because you have Brian and Margot communicating, and we get the epistolary,
the emails,
the emails that from them. But so you have, but they're not essentially digital natives the way that Liz and Evie are. So how do you view the differences between each of their relationships to the internet?
I mean, Margot and Brian and their kind of web 1.0 versus the girls, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the girls definitely have that like digital native sense, right? That's always their go-to. Like right when they want to know like what's going on with their dad, right? It's like they go straight to Google. They don't hesitate before not only like finding their mom in this Reddit forum, but like inventing a whole identity. Like the idea for them of inventing a whole identity for yourself is like a native language, because it's what their generation does constantly all day, right?
Yeah.
And then for Margot, it's like whether you go back to the email communication that she had with Brian when they were in college, or you kind of jump forward to her use of the forum, to her use of, say, Zillow to imagine a life for herself after he dies, or even her more like utilitarian use of it, for listing her houses on her business, right? Her rental houses. It's more of a utility. Even Facebook for her is like, she doesn't have that like native understanding of it. And she kind of like dips her toe in and then retreats right after Brian dies. right? And then it feels icky and terrible, right? So it doesn't have that feel that it has for the girls of this place that they exist every day and are so comfortable in, you know?
What do you think about, and I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but what do you think about like the ethics of basically catfishing your mom? Not necessarily catfishing, but like they're so much more savvy at what they're doing, and they must know that she's not maybe aware, like she just assumes she's talking to other, you know, women going through grief and trauma. Like, what do you think of the ethics of basically tricking your mom to manipulate her into like doing what you want her to do or what you want to do?
Well, and like a follow-up question is like, are the ethics of it different if you were there are definitely different kinds of catfishing. Like,
sure.
So
yeah.
So in this case, at least from two out of three of the characters' perspectives from the two girls, their perspective is like they're taking what they need. They're going to find like what's missing and what they are like, hey, we weren't ready for this person in terms of their mom. They were like, we didn't give you permission to just like leave us alone and not open up to us. We want you to do that. So we're going to get this because we want it. So from that perspective, like I give them a pass. I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. I don't think it's the same as like, you know, some other sort of catfishing scheme where you like trick a romantic partner or something like that, you know?
I think they maybe get a pass because they're kids, but there is, and they're dealing with such an extreme circumstance, but like it would be wildly messed up for like, for example, for me to just like show up at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and be like, just absorbing people's stories and then telling my own stories and pretending so that I could like, cause she's not just as Pomplamoose or I forget the second name.
Scrabble Mary.
Scrabble Mary 45.
Invoking these ideas of sort of middle-agedness, right? But they're not only sort of betraying their mother, they're betraying every person in that group by misrepresenting themselves, right? Because they, like, when you enter groups like that, the assumption is that everyone in there is being honest. So they're essentially running like a kind of Marla from Fight Club game on these women, which is, if you're one of those women, I can imagine being like, look, we're all going through grief. Like, you're still doing something terrible to us, and we trusted you. How could I trust Scrabble Mary? How could I trust anyone on the internet ever again?
Yeah, right. But I don't know. Maybe this is too abstract, but if you're getting what you need, right? Like, you don't really know that anyone there is who they say they are. That's true anywhere on the internet. So if somebody's there and they need it, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's also okay. This is a very specific kind of catfishing, right? So she's not trying to get money from anybody or extort anything. True. Yeah, you know, I've actually never thought of like the trick they're also playing on the other women, right? I think I've always given them a pass on that too.
I think one reason why I might give them another pass is, and here's something that I was thinking about with Brian and Margot's emails too, because they're an example of a generation on the internet. It's almost pre-deception. Their emails are so raw and full of like complete total honesty, and then Margot is also so raw and full of total honesty on the message boards. Almost in contrast to that, but I'd say probably more parallel to that is Liz and Evie are on the message boards with these fake personalities, but the fake personalities are actually allowing them to express a truth that they can't express to their friends and to the other people in their lives. Like, they can't talk to Gabe about it. You can talk to Olivia about it, but they're really saying the things that they need to be saying to their mother that they can't be saying. So,
and they do say to their mother via the post.
Yes. So it is like, in a sense, they're not tricking anybody. They're being more honest than they would be in quote unquote whatever the real world is.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that the late 90s emails and the early days of email are pre-deception, because in a way those are even more problematic to have shared, because the people who wrote them never thought that anyone would be able to see them, right? Those were made if you post something on social media today, there's an assumption that people will see it. But it felt very private in those early days of internet, right? And very ephemeral. They saved it at some point to this just text document, but you would not imagine that it would be shared or disseminated, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think that's a really interesting comparison between those two kinds of sharing. Like, at least on the forum, there's some assumption that it's a form of social media.
Right. I think there's an understanding now that basically, whether you want to admit it or not, anything that people want to find out about you can be found on the internet. And so whether you're aware of that or not, putting it out there is going to be public. But I do think that the CD that they burn the text document onto in that like binder of music CDs is a really nice way to sort of bridge the gap between that like Web 1 and modern, because like there's no way that Evie and Liz would have CDs, like they're all just on Spotify or whatever, but it's like it's a bridge from the way that things used to be and a way to keep in touch with their dad as he's leaving them. I think it's a nice like physical reminder of this transition from the way things used to be to the way things are now.
As a 16 and 17-year-old kids in the year 2019, right? Liz has a little bit more of a reverence. She's the older sister. She has a little more reverence for these actual artifacts, which is what they are to them.
Sure, yeah.
Her sister suggests in one scene, she's like, we can just listen to all these same songs on Spotify list. Just put these, this is dumb. And Liz has this reverence for the objects and the skipping and the scratching and the little booklets and everything, that the sisters vary in their view of technology in that way. But yeah, I think that's true.
I also do want to go back to the forum just for 1 second. I do think the funniest moment in the book is when they start that second account and Evie is coming up with her first post as a Seattle woman. She's like, well, I went to Starbucks in the Space Needle today. And Liz is like, no, you idiot. Like, what are you talking about? So I thought that was very funny. It's just like, I know things about Seattle. It's, the coffee brand and the tourist attractions. Like, what are you doing? So I thought that was very funny.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's it's an example of the things that teenagers are so interesting, and there are things that they nail, and they know about you as an adult that you thought they did not know, and there are things that they get so wrong. Like, there are things they're so oblivious to, right? And I think that, yeah, like those parts where the 16, 17-year-old girls are writing this 45-year-old mom, they were my absolute favorite parts to write. Because I think it's such an interesting question of like when they would take their best guess and the ways they would workshop it together and what they would get wrong, right? Like how vague should you be? Like, what would a mom complain about at the end of the day? What would she talk about in her post, right? If she's like, once she veers away from the glioblastoma stuff that they do know.
I got the sense when I was reading that you as a writer are relating really hard to those daughters. It's hard for me to write. I'm 38 years old,
yeah,
and like it's hard to imagine the ways in which 17, 18-year-olds act now on the level of like how they would respond to grief and things like that. But at the same time, I also like very much still feel like an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. What's the process for adapting yourself or your idea of a 17-year-old, 18-year-old girl into this kind of writing? I guess that's a really abstract and weird question, but I hope it came across.
So I think this leads to another like interesting origin story part of this book, which is like so it took me over 10 years to write the whole thing, right? And it started out as just a 17-year-old girl. And I started it 10 or 12 years ago when I was like way more in between. I was in my late 20s. I think there's a lot of writers who can imagine themselves into middle-aged or older characters. I think Claire Lombardo blurbed this book, and I think she does a fantastic job of that, of writing older characters. But I personally, I don't think I'm as good of a writer as that. And I don't think I could have imagined the mother until I was physically and like emotionally closer to her age. So in the 12 years that I worked on this book and it was different iterations, the world changed, and B, I got older and became a mom myself. So I think that's the answer to this, is that it sounds like both, because it is both, because it started as this 17-year-old girl, and really slowly and mirroring my own life, the mom became part of the story. I queried this book as just the 17-year-old girl version of it. And
okay.
I think it just confused people because it was not really YA and it was kind of too short. And I learned a lot of lessons, which a lot of people do when they're doing that.
Sure.
But that's really what I thought it was for a long time. And it wasn't. It wanted to be the whole family, but I think I had to get closer to that phase of life to tell both stories. I don't know if that'll be true forever, but for this story, it was.
There's a version of this story where, I mean, again, going back to antagonists, where if you don't write it with like the sensitivity of someone who can also relate to Margot, that Margot becomes someone that is a villain, which is like weird to make the wife of someone who's dying from a particularly insidious form of cancer.
Some readers have had a hard time with her, and I think she's a 10 out of 10 version. You know, I think it's like the way that I explain it, right? Like, I think every woman who would go through this might have like a set of reactions and a set of behaviors that are to some degree what Margot would do. But I think a lot of the best fiction takes these experiences and makes them 10 out of 10, right? Like,
sure.
Anybody who's been through loss knows the reverberations of it through people who are close to the person, right? Like, you lose them to some degree, like we talked about earlier. So going to find them in a Reddit forum is the 10 out of 10 version of that, right? So I love fiction that does that, right? That takes what you felt and just blows it up, right? And makes it the most extreme version of it, so you can kind of have that catharsis.
And it feels like she knows, even though she sort of feels adrift and trying to figure out what to do with her life, I think that she also at the same time knows definitively what she wants, because it's like the day after he dies, she takes off the ring, and then maybe like that same day or like the same week, she like drives hundreds of miles to find a new house. She's like, all right, new chapter, like I'm doing this, and just like take a little bit, like grieve a little bit, but also, you know, it tracks for her character, I think.
I think anyone who's experienced loss understands that impulse to be like, oh, no, not like, you can feel that tidal wave coming and you're like not ready for it. Like, just, I will do anything I can to just like sidestep this for a moment. So again, she's the extreme version of it, right? Does every person like sell their entire business and make a plan to move hundreds of miles away? No. But does every person put it off to some degree and wait until they're ready, which is never, or try to, right? Yes, for sure. Right. Like, I don't think you'll find one person who's experienced a loss who hasn't tried to distract themselves or sidestep it in some way. Right.
For sure. Mm-hmm. I want to go back a second to when you were mentioning this took you 12 years to write. This whole season that we're doing, the whole module we're doing right now, is about the internet, and there is a lot of online elements, obviously, with the forum and like the texting and sort of Instagram and everything. And I'm wondering if in the time it took you to write, like, I feel like technology has changed more in those 12 years than probably in any 12 years before. Like, because I mean, Facebook was still around probably when you started this, right? But like, did the rise of new ways of communicating or new apps or anything change or inform the way that these characters behaved? Or was it always, because like, in a way, the way that they're interacting is still kind of like from that era, like from the Web 1 era, Web 2 era, whatever, but there's also, it feels like it's more core to their lives today. Like, did that change over those 12 years, or was it always sort of similar to how it wound up?
Yeah, when it was the story of one 17-year-old, and that would have been closer to 2010, right? Would have been when she was around, when she would have been first telling this story. There wasn't very much social media in it at all, because at that time, it really was just Facebook. That was it, right? And honestly, even smartphones were new. They were, if you go back that far, I think I got my first one in 2010. So a teenager might not even have had one.
I definitely didn't have one.
And if you go back that far, absolutely. As time went on, right? So Instagram, dating apps, Reddit and Reddit style forums would have existed, but they were not part of that like initial 17-year-old story. Using Airbnb, I don't know when that started, but I think it was after 2010. I think it was.
Probably,
I don't think, yeah. And Facebook as being so ubiquitous, right? And a thing that that changed from like the cool thing to like the thing that your mom would use. It all happened in those 12 years. And it even became more important, social media became more important to the teenagers' relationships in their ways that the ways they kind of like learn about the person and then break up with the person and try to get away from the person, right? Like, if you compare the teenage girls to their parents, right? The parents also kind of have breakups and date and then don't for long periods, but then the girls have to make really conscious decisions. Like when Liz breaks up with Gabe, like she has to have this, like, I'm blocking you everywhere. You know, she knows that, like, she doesn't have the self-discipline to stay away from seeing what he's up to if she doesn't just boom, like, block it. Like they have, I think I infuse them with more discipline than I personally have myself.
Although you did leave open the door of she didn't block his band, right? So he's still able to get to her a little bit. So it's like, was that on purpose, or was that just like a happy accident or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I thought it was funny that, like, he didn't get the note, or maybe he did or whatever, that, like, he's blocked, but he's like, oh, I can still see him. Like, he still, like, likes or comments. It's like, dude, just take a note, back off a little bit.
That's classic, like, internet bro, though. That's a real. How do we feel about Gabe? Joey? What's your take on Gabe?
I think Gabe is. I get the Gabe character. It's like, ooh, he's exotic and he's older and he's cool and he's helping me drink, and then just like, oh no, he kind of sucks.
I love that he's exotic because he's from New York, which is like 90 miles away or 70 miles away or something like that.
And I had to make him a really specific age so he wouldn't be creepy. You know, like, he's actually only like 18 months older than Liz, even though he's in this other life phase. You know, I'd be like, I don't want to make him a creep. He can be a jerk, but not a creep.
Well, she does. In her head, she hits him with a really brutal, like, why don't you go find another underage girl to sleep with?
Oh, yeah.
Which is like, that's like a real, like, if you hit a guy with a line like that, that's it.
Gabe has elicited some strong responses. One of my editors, his name used to be Dave also, and that changed, but clearly he's not a Dave. But I gave her a
Gabe is a good name for him. Gabe is a very, like, appropriately douchey name for him.
Yeah, right. It's perfect. But his name used to be Dave, and this editor hated that, and then, which correctly, she was right. She's younger than me, and she was right. And I gave her a plant as a gift once, and it's a snake plant. And she named it Dave after him. I was like, also appropriate. Yep, I can take that. You know, what's interesting about him, though, is Liz is using him, like, just as much, right? Like, the conscious choice to keep so much from him and to be like, I am using you as, like, you know, the hot guy, the distraction, the, like, personal...
As an escape, right?
Yeah, right. The personal, like, level up. I'm going to walk you and your tattoos right past the guy who made fun of me on the track team one time. Sure. We're going to walk right past that guy, and he can just see what's going on with Liz now. Like, you know, like, look, I get the band guy.
In Gabe's defense, I think he is able to respond to the simple text of "hey" in a way that I never could. Like, I don't know how to parse this, but he writes that whole, like, eloquent, like, maybe goes overboard. I'm just like, that's a very definitive, like, he knows what he's doing. I'm like, all right, okay, Gabe.
He has good game. It's clearly not his first rodeo with getting girls like this.
I think when Liz is doing, gosh, I hope that I'm remembering this correctly, because I've read like 10 books between reading
Bob
this
reads
book
too many
now.
books.
No worry. But I would be honored to be confused with another good book that you've read.
No. I'm definitely not confusing it with another book. I might be confusing the person that's speaking. But there's a section, I think, when Liz is speaking, when she is thinking of how to, like, write a text in response, and it's hey, and then a number of responses that come after the word hey, right? Is that accurate? That's Liz that's speaking in that moment?
She's kind of like thinking through the post good date, post first kiss.
So that to me felt almost like it had its roots in a different kind of, like, poetry, and it felt to me like when you do readings, is that the part do you read that part?
Totally is. I just read it. Yes, it's my favorite. It's my favorite part to read. But I also think another thing that I think more established and more famous, to be honest, writers can get away with is a lot of setup. Like, you know, have you ever been to a reading where there's a long setup and you have to hear about 7 family members before before. And I always lose track, and I'm like, nope, I don't know who these people are. I don't know. I'm just going to listen. I don't think I can get away with that. So it kind of limits it. You really want to read something from the beginning, but without all the setup you need is Liz went on a date and it went well, and Dad's sick at home. Like, that's all you need.
It also avoids the reader trap of dialogue. Like, it's impossible to read dialogue when you're doing a reading.
Yeah.
You have to go back and forth between 2 different people doing voices, or doing, like, he said, she said.
Yes.
And that part's always very hard to read. But when I read that, I was like, oh, I can hear, like, the music or prosody or whatever in this, and it really sounds like something that is meant to be read out loud.
So funny. I've just been reading that part, the last couple of events I just had. You know what's funny, though? I love a good audiobook. The only kind of fiction I can listen to myself, for fun, is like if it is this multiple narrator cast, I can't listen to like a one narrator fiction. My mind wanders too much. I can only like read that. But there's a great thing that really good audio actors do, where if there's dialogue, like you're talking about, they kind of do voices. And there's a really particular, like once you've heard this, you're gonna hear it everywhere. If there's a female narrator and there's kind of a jerk guy, there's a really particular voice that like a female actress can do that's the best. Like once you're like, I don't think that male actors quite do it in the same way or can quite pull it off in the same way, but it's like, hey.
Does this book exist in audio form, and is that voice attributed to Gabe or no?
Yes, that they do. The audio actor does kind of do that voice for Gabe.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I think the cast did a beautiful job. And there's an actor who does Brian, who he really is only beginning and the end, but he jumps in for the emails, which I didn't realize he was going to do that, and it kind of took me off guard. I was a little hesitant to listen to it, like, and then I finally did, and I heard these Brian voices come in the middle, and I was like, oh, it was like a familiar friend was back,
That's so cool.
Yeah.
My very first experience with audiobooks was when I was a freshman in college, and we were reading As I Lay Dying. For some reason, the teacher brought in like an audiobook that we could listen to in class, and it was like this long thing of a guy reading in this like southern drawl, and then he got to a woman character, and he just did the silliest Monty Python falsetto voice that like everyone in the class just started laughing, and the teacher got so angry at us. But it was like the worst version of what an audiobook could possibly be.
Yeah, right. It doesn't even a really good actor, a male actor. It's tricky to do the other way, right?
For sure, yeah.
That would be a hard one on audio.
I do want to ask you about, I think we should talk about the boardwalk and the shore. I have a very, do I want to save my question for later, or should I just ask it now?
Let's do, there's the question. Yeah, go ahead.
The question of the hour. Do you have a favorite boardwalk game?
I don't know how anyone who grew up there could choose anything besides skee ball. I think that's clearly the best game. Like, I think it's the fairest also.
Okay.
My family had those wheel games, so the wheel games, the claw games, like, anything electronic, right? Like the spray with the gun games. Those are all like really stacked against you. But
can I tell you my game is I'm a coin pusher. I'm a coin pusher guy.
The coin games are that's so hard.
Yeah. Have you had success with those? Well, like
no.
You must have.
No, not really. It's like they're impossible. But it's like there's something about my brain that really enjoys watching the coins like get pushed and fall over and stuff.
And I have ever heard who has tried any boardwalk games who likes that one. That fascinating. I have so many follow-up questions.
Well, some people have to like them, right? Because they're in every arcade.
Yeah. Oh, that's totally true. How do you guys feel about pinball?
Yeah, I like pinball.
I wish I was better at pinball.
I used to play the Guns N' Roses pinball game in Point Pleasant.
Yeah. I like the Addams Family. That was a fun one.
That's a good one too.
It had a really like loud. It was very. They're all loud. My dad, he got, like lost a bet or won a bet or something, or some guy in the boardwalk owed him money. He paid us in a pinball machine, so we have one in our house for a little while. My mom,
oh, that's cool.
My mom hated it.
I bet. Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare.
My favorite one is it's got its lineage in skee ball, but it's like a sitting down one, and I don't know how best to describe it other than like it's the horses racing across in front of you, and there's like the skee ball, there's the one ball you roll, and there's like slow, fast, faster.
Yeah.
And whatever hole you get it in and I like that one because I'm very good at it.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
There's like 6 holes, like imagine like almost like a baseball diamond at the top. And there's one that's like in the front that like if you get in there, it goes slowest or something. And if you get in the middle, it goes a little bit faster, but it's harder to do. And if you get in the back, it goes farthest or fastest or whatever, but it's hardest to do. And I figured out from a very young age, if you just aim for like the middle ones, like sort of like medium and steady, you crush it. So like I love this game because it's sort of like skee ball, and like you're rolling it and trying to get it in like a certain path or lane or arc or whatever, but like I'm not good at skee ball. We were talking about skee ball before you joined us, Katie, and I'm like, I'm not good at skee ball. Like I wish that like I aim for the hundreds in the corners. I can't do it.
That's not the strategy. Don't
straight up the middle, and like maybe aim for a 50 here and there, but no, slow and steady, right in that 30.
But yeah, I do like the skee ball adjacent game, but yeah, the coin game that surprised me too. I did not see that one coming for Bob. So
Yeah, well, I don't know how honest it is. I mean, I do like the coin, but I mean, skee ball is clearly like that's like that's the Beatles of shore games, and then coin pushers is like the esoteric Frank Zappa or something like that. I don't know.
My family goes so far back. This might have been the same pinball friend. I don't know, but they had. I remember when there were cartons of cigarettes that you could win on the boardwalk.
For sure.
And there was a line like constantly outside that one. Like that like that's a thing that happened for years.
Yeah, like let the kids play the skee ball games. Don't like the adults are just playing so that they can win cigarettes.
Yeah, right. I know.
This novel did answer a question that I had growing up, but I never played these kind of games at an age where I would do this. But I'm like, who would ever leave tickets behind at a skee ball game? Like, I don't understand, but like, yeah, it's just like 17-year-olds who are like not doing it to redeem a prize, but like you would walk around an arcade, they'd be like, oh my God, there's tickets on the ground because you're 10 years old. You're like, this is the best day of all time. And it's just like some other kids like, I don't care about this. So I like that they left the tickets behind because it unlocked a question, it answered a question in my brain that I've had kicking around, I guess, for 20 years. Like,
wow.
Who would ever dare leave value behind? But, you know.
Oh, you need a billion of those tickets.
Not worth it, yeah.
And on a date, you get the extra credit of like, that's generous, right? She will view you as like a generous and magnanimous person for leaving these for the kids, right?
Yep. I'm making a note right here about the next date I go on at the boardwalk. Leave the tickets behind.
That's right.
To appear like a generous person.
Yes, that's right. And just be like, I don't need that spider ring.
No one needs the spider ring.
I had a ring I won on the boardwalk one time that it left a green ring that stayed on my skin like the whole summer.
Oh my!
After I took it off.
Yeah, that's brutal.
That's how you know it's quality. If it discolors your skin, it's like this is what the good stuff's made of.
I have two more questions. This is a radical tonal shift, so I apologize.
I'm here for it.
We're about to get real serious.
Moving
I'm here into Cancer and well, let's talk about Hurricane Sandy first. Like Hurricane Sandy is kind of a specter in the book because it almost breaks up the family, and I think for people who live at the Jersey Shore as I do, it's this thing that is like even now kind of unreal to think about. So like when you're thinking about this book, what role do you have Hurricane Sandy playing in it in your head?
It is this unreal thing that by the time we're here in 2019, right? It was 2012, right? I think
2012,
right? So almost everything would be rebuilt by then, right? And they would by then too. There was even this sense of pride, and the towns looked really beautiful again by then, right?
Yeah, this is I like have a little bit of a beef with that because like maybe around 2012, but I remember for years afterwards there were these Stronger Than the Storm commercials with like Chris Christie where he was like not to get too political here.
Yeah,
but, like,
we've mentioned him on like 3 or 4 podcasts. He's a core member of this podcast like, in a way.
Chris Christie was like on the
podcast,
news talking shit about like what a good job he's done. When it's like if you drove through Seabright. Like, it was, like, for, like, 10 years, Seabright was still destroyed.
Yeah.
Like, nobody bothered to fix that place. There's still huge buildings that are completely boarded up because and Seabright is a town that, like, should be massively profitable, should have all of these things going. But, like, it is massively mishandled and so like is still like this specter of a terrible thing hanging over this area. But sorry, I interrupted to go on a rant about Chris Christie, which I do sometimes. So please, if I didn't derail you too much, please return to
I don't think you could have a Jersey podcast without him coming up. So by 2019 there would be pride and devastation, and this sense of right, that mirrors what they're going through personally, right? That like at any moment, right, everything could be gone. Like, I don't think that ever like really goes away once you've experienced that feeling that everything is a little bit temporary. And I hope there's a sense from this, like not directly, but kind of just pervading it that this place is really beautiful and they're grateful to be back there as well. Yeah. For the individual family, right? Which so their particular story, it's like a literal storm that they weathered, right? There's this like storm within a storm because this like triggers this storm in their marriage as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because for the kids, it's also a time when they were much littler and their parents were sort of absent and really stressed out. And they had to get through that. So it comes up kind of in parallel to what they're going through now with their dad, because they're like, oh, right, this is this other time that we went through something that we did get through, but it was really hard, you know? I think it's also like Brian's reaction then is it's like that question we were talking about earlier about how do you show someone who's not himself and show him as a real full person, right? And you don't want to like deify him and you don't want to villainize him. You just want to make him a real complex person, right? So this is not his finest moment at all, right? But I think anyone who's been in a long-term relationship has weathered these same ups and downs, right? And these times when something's stressful externally, you see the person respond in a way that you do not expect, and you have to get through that. So that's Sandy for the family, and then I hope there's the more complicated way that the town and the people refer to it.
Well, I like your instinct to and admire your instinct to like avoid making Brian like a super dad in those moments, because he has such ugly moments later on that you want to say like, well, no, this isn't who he is. He is this magnanimous, wonderful, benevolent person. But in that, in resisting that, I think he becomes much more of a real, actual human being. And so we can see the grief in a much more three-dimensional way.
Yeah, there's no temptation when someone is, especially when someone dies, right, to present them that way. And I don't think that's fair, especially in fiction, which has the freedom to do so much more than you would do at like a wake, you know, like there's a time and place for it. And I think like
right.
a complex long novel is the place for it.
Yeah. There is something with regards to Hurricane Sandy, there is something that like was a bit of a barrier for me with relating to these characters or making me
or empathizing with them because, and I don't know, I'm speaking exclusively for Manasquan here, which is again the town that I've grown up in and loved my whole life. When Hurricane Sandy happened and those like so many houses were destroyed and people had to leave, and people came in and bought up those houses. When they bought them up, they put up condos and stuff, and the community almost completely disappeared. So I was thinking of this, like Brian and Margot, like profiteering off of Hurricane Sandy, and thinking of that as like, oh, this is something that's keeping me like
from really
cultural erasure,
from really loving these people. Because when I saw that happen in my town, I thought like, oh, this town will never be the same again because all of the locals have gone. And now we have these condos and these really expensive houses, and regular people can't live here anymore because of the people who bought them and are now renting them. So like, is that something that you thought about when you were writing this, or what?
Definitely. And I don't think as far as like who gets a pass and who doesn't, I don't think they get a pass on that because they are local, right? It's not like there's some big corporation coming in from out of town, but they definitely were buying up things that like might have been people's family homes, right? That they ended up buying up for their real estate company. Like, absolutely. And you know, it's interesting. They don't think of it that way. So they think of it as like, right, they were teachers and then went into this business, and they think that they're like, this is the only way we can stay here. From the time they have their first rental, their little garage apartment, they're like, well, we can't, like, if we want to have kids, we can't be working every weekend and 24/7 every summer in order to support our seaside habit. So for them, they see it as the only way to like launch themselves into the economic class they need to be in to stay in this town. So it's interesting. I actually agree with you from my own perspective, but Margot and Brian would probably not see themselves that way.
Well, I think there's a nice reflexive bit at the end. Maybe that's not the right word, where she almost tries to do the same thing in the landlocked town that she visits, and she's like, she tries to like lowball, and they're like, no, fuck off, like get out of here. But I think that's also like her like understanding like she this is not where she's meant to be. But I do think that it's kind of funny that she's like, hey, I did it once, it was successful, I'm gonna do it again here. And they're like, no, get out of here, you weirdo. Yeah,
well, it's funny too. She's self-sabotaging herself there a little bit too. She knows the amount she would need to pay to do that and to get that house. And you know, it's almost, she freaks out a little bit and comes to her senses a little bit too. You know, like this is her area of expertise, and she's not as ready as she thought she was, right? To totally leave the town.
Reading this book, being the age that I am, and where I'm from, I 100% appreciate the use of Mount Airy Lodge as a soothing balm for everyone. And I could just hear in my head over and over again, all you have to bring is your love of everything, beautiful Mount Airy Lodge.
I want to sing the jingle. I hope I hope they wouldn't sue us if we say.
I don't know. I think they might. It might be a completely different owners. It's still there. I went there a couple of years ago and was like, this is not what it used to be.
Oh,
but,
yeah. It is so in the psyche of anyone who grew up in the tri-state area. The commercials and the champagne. I remember thinking that champagne bubble bath was the height of luxury. And actually, we went, my mom and my sister and I went, I think my dad was doing boardwalk stuff. He did not come. We went to the Poconos once, and like my mom had reserved a family area, and they were like, whoops, we're out of those. They gave us it was like mirrors everywhere, like a heart. It wasn't a champagne bath, but it was a heart jacuzzi, a round bed, and we were surrounded by couples, and so like, and they were just very confused. They were like, why are these kids here? What's happening? But I have stayed in one of the couples those like 70s-tastic couples rooms. They're great.
Yeah, I love it. I got to go back.
One of the questions we were going to ask later is what the outro music you would like on this episode, but I think it has to be the Mount Airy Lodge jingle. I think that's just how this episode is going to end.
Please.
I think we're going to play that with that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Also, if you're feeling nostalgic, if you go on YouTube, like this is a weird, creepy thing to do, but it's also like the internet, so whatever. Like there are like home videos from people at Mount Airy Lodge where it's just like, here's us on our family vacation in 1991, and you can watch it and just be like, holy shit, that was life in 1991. These people just enjoying Mount Airy Lodge.
You take a little detour, you see some Amish things on your way home. I think it's a rite of passage.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else that's more like 90s New Jersey than that theme song.
No, there's nowhere like that.
One thing that every time we talk to someone, one thing that we ask, because the way that this podcast is set up is that each season is a different theme. So this is part of the internet theme. That's why a lot of this interview is focused on this conversation. I don't know if it's an interview. Who knows? We're just talking here. We're just talking. It's just like three Jersey people just talking about New Jersey. But we've been focusing on the internet because that's what this theme is about. All the books that we're reading this season are about the internet or tie into the internet in one way or another. And so we did not prep you for this. So there's no pressure. But if you were to design your own kind of mini season, like 3 or 4 books that are either maybe inspired the shore or thematically linked or just that you like or anything like that, if you were coming up with a couple books that if people read the shore and really liked it, that they would want to go and read other things that are like it, what would you recommend? Do you have favorites genre-wise or, location-wise or anything like that?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go in. So it's not internet related, but kind of shore theme related. I think there's a couple directions you can go. So I would go if you're thinking about like people who are not themselves, right? If that's sort of the theme, the books that I read and that were like, oh my God, look what they did. I feel different when I finish this. I feel like I have a new understanding of the experience of caring for someone who's not themselves, right? So the things I put on that reading list would be We Are Not Ourselves by Matthew Thomas. That's a character with dementia, and it really focuses on the wife and, kind of what happens with her after. It's really beautiful. I would also put Goodbye Vitamin by Rachel Kong on that list.
I've read it. I love it.
Yes, and couldn't be more different as far as like the style of the novel, right? It's like We Are Not Ourselves is like a pretty doorstoppy novel, and then Goodbye Vitamin is super tiny, but it's also epistolary. It's a girl returns home story. It returns to Orange County. She's like about 30, and she's also leaving a relationship that didn't work out, right? And caring for a dad who has dementia. But it also has these like absurdist tones, like she does her mom's like Jane Fonda workout videos, right? And there's these moments like when she's kind of like reacquainting herself with Orange County that are really great. It's really beautiful, but also has
Does Goodbye Vitamin, is that the book that has like the father's notebook where he writes in it like here are the things that you asked me, like it's his daughter reading it, and it's like, you asked me this, I found that to be really devastating.
It was so beautiful, right? And like also a dad who's not perfect. You really discover and two siblings who had really different experiences. Dad was an alcoholic for like, I think he was alcoholic for one of the kids and not the other. or like what was recovering with one and was more. So anyway, that one I like returned to again. I remember like where I was when I read that, so that goes on the list. That goes on the reading list, right? If you're continuing, and then one actually just came out, and I am obsessed with it. It's called The Swimmers by Julie Otsuka. What that book does, as far as point of view, it's also about a character with dementia, and it's really skinny. I actually have it right here. It's like, I don't know, it's like under 170 pages, but it starts out with a group of people who swim at the same pool. And it's like a we voice from all of them. And they're like kind of obsessed with this crack in the pool. And then it narrows to this one character who's part of that we, who's experiencing dementia. And then the ways they play with point of view in the next two sections are like just devastating and so beautiful. So really different.
Really interesting.
Yeah. And I would also put like some addiction memoirs in the same reading list. So I can't remember the author's name right now, but the name of the book is Smacked. It's an addiction memoir from the point of view of the family. And then it's this guy, a really successful lawyer, who goes through a lot of addiction issues. But the interesting part is like, I feel like there are not a billion addiction memoirs that are from the point of view of the family. Like, I think there are more that are from the point of view of the person who's going through it themselves.
Is that Eileen Zimmerman? Is that one?
Correct. Yeah, that one. Yep. And she's a journalist, so it's like it has that really well put together, like I've been doing this my whole life kind of like narrative vibe to it. So I think I listened to that one on audio too. I think she reads it and it's really good. There are so many more, but those are kind of in my top favorites for if you want more books about characters who are not themselves and the people who are caring for them.
And then I have one other, and this is, I don't know if this is easy or impossible, but do you have a favorite book that's set in New Jersey?
Yes. Okay. I would say, like, most recent favorite, right? There are so many, is probably Rock the Boat by Beck Dorey-Stein. And that's just my most recent. And can I put a B-teen one? Because there's only one chapter of it. One chapter of The Girl's Guide to Hunting and Fishing is set at the Jersey Shore. There's other parts that are set in other parts of New Jersey, but I just read that when I was 17, and I think that is one that's like really worth revisiting and reading again as a grown-up if you read it when you were a teenager.
That's awesome.
So, yes, I really do love those two. And of course, I love Bud Smith's book, Teenager, which starts in New Jersey.
Sure, yeah.
So you have to shout that one out. And I think in a part of Jersey that, that Pine Barrens area that I think is like underrepresented.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you, do I have this right? You went to high school with Bud?
Same graduating class. Yes.
Yeah, that's wild.
Had a couple of English classes together. I know. I have not found out if this has ever happened in the history of books before. So far, I have not found out that no one has come forward to be like, oh yeah, that happens all the time.
Two people in the same high school graduating class?
Right.
I'll look into it.
And debut in the same month.
Yeah, that's wild. That is crazy. Yeah.
Never happened.
We love Bud.
I have a favor to ask of you. The door is open, whatever. So we talked to Bud a couple of weeks ago for the show. And we interviewed him about Teenager, and he talked about how he gets asked like for people to like he had like people say like write a poem for my wedding or whatever, and so he made a promise to me that if we talk 2 more times, he will eulogize me at my funeral. I'm not planning to die anytime soon, but he promised to eulogize me at my funeral.
Wow.
So because you went to high school with Bud, you graduated together, I feel like this is a pact that your entire class has to make to me. So after you and I talk 3 more times, so a total of 4, what will you do for me?
Oh, wow. Let's see. He's already eulogizing you, right? It has to be. It has to be. I have to write something regarding you.
Well, I mean, I think it just has to be something from your heart that, like, you feel like represents both of us well.
I think you could maybe officiate his wedding.
I've actually always wanted to do that.
You should do it.
You got it. I'll at least like write whatever the officiant wants to read. I always thought that would be really fun. I've genuinely considered it as a side hustle.
I've done it 4 times.
Yeah, I've been to in the last like 18 months. I went to one wedding that Bob officiated, and then another one of our really good friends got married in Greece, and it was a very small wedding, but Bob went over there and married them too. So
that's right. Yeah, it's my side gig that I don't get paid for.
The curse of being a writer is like you never think anyone does a good job with their vows.
Every time that I've done it, I have the exact same experience every time that I've done it.
Like,
is that like I feel like I feel a little bit like weak about what I've done, but then when the bride reads her vows. Niagara Falls. I'm just tearing up.
Well, because you're marrying like the dudes
crying.
are usually the ones you're friends with, right? And so
I just feel so I feel so emotional once they're written. They write their own vows, but once they write their own vows, man, I get leveled by it.
I will say in Bob's defense that when he married our friends Dylan and Nancy, he did a wonderful job too. So that was very emotional. He just spoke from the heart, and that was very good. And they both had great vows. But don't let Bob sell himself short. He did a great job. So I'm going to hold you to this, Katie. I'm going to make you
you got it.
Something for my wedding. Mm-hmm.
You got it. No E.E. Cummings in there. I mean, you're like, we're doing E.E. Cummings again, huh?
Cool.
Yes, you got it. No problem.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I think that's about everything, right?
I think so.
We probably went over 45 minutes. That's okay, though.
We're over an hour now, baby.
All right, cool.
Yeah, that's what editing is for.
That's what editing's for. But thank you so much, Katie. This was awesome. Thank you for writing the book and for talking to us and for representing New Jersey in the written word.
This was so much fun, and I'm so happy to get to talk to. This is a first. Two guys from New Jersey talking on a podcast is a. Yes, this is a first. It was very exciting and very fun.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Now is the perfect time, and the season is just right. You can play all day and dance into the night. At beautiful Mount Airy Lodge, all you have to bring is your love of everything.
For reservations, phone 1-800-441-4410.
All you have to bring is your love.